The last decade was huge for gaming. We saw the end of the 7th generation at the beginning, and we were closing in on the end of the 8th generation in 2019. Many franchises were started, revived, and died during this time. Gaming became more popular than it's ever been with the rise of streaming and content creation. All that being said, it all comes down to the games, in which I had to narrow down a list of 112 games I played to about 20 I liked above all the rest. Just like my top 10 games of 2019 list, remastered and updated ports are excluded, but remakes are fair game. With all that said, here are my top 20 games of the last decade. Number 20. Bendy and the Ink Machine. I don't need to prattle on about how horror games have gotten a resurgence for better and for worse. There's a lot to choose from these days, and some games gain a popularity that can only be described as cringe. Despite that, Bendy and the Ink Machine was a fun game to play through. Now I'll get this out of the way. I didn't find this game all that scary. In fact, that's not why I wanted to play it. I was intrigued by the 1930s cartoon influence, the general art design, and the color palette being limited to beige and black, which added to its aesthetic. It was the puzzle solving and exploration that really got me into the game, where the horror aspects were more subdued. The story was engaging and kept me playing on. If you've been put off by the game's overzealous fanbase, you gotta ignore that and play this one. It's seriously one of the most fun times I've had with a horror game, even if the horror wasn't the focal point. Number 19. Overcooked. Overcooked is a love letter to anyone who has worked in a fast-paced kitchen environment. By that, I mean it's a party game that exaggerates the concept of preparing food in a restaurant. That being said, it is very similar to working in a kitchen as it requires teamwork and cooperation to get through the vast amount of levels. And you'll need it, as this game isn't afraid to turn up the heat, making the problem solving more frantic. There is something to be said, however, for when you finally beat that level as a team. It's a sense of satisfaction and accomplishment that's also met with dread and exhaustion. No matter which way you slice it, Overcooked is a fantastic game to play with friends, and it ain't bad solo either. Number 18. Bloodstained, Curse of the Moon. This one is a repeat from my top games of 2018 list, so there isn't much more I can say about it. If you consider yourself a fan of classic Castlevania games and you haven't played this gem yet, rectify that now. It's super cheap and it's worth your time. Ritual of the Night is also really fun. Number 17. Fire Emblem Warriors. Fire Emblem is a series that I'll admit I haven't spent enough time with. Most of my time has been with Awakening and Three Houses, both fantastic tactical RPGs. When it comes to spin-offs, there's Tokyo Mirage Sessions, which I have yet to play, and my personal favorite, Fire Emblem Warriors. Combining the story and characters of Fire Emblem with the fast-paced strategy action gameplay of Dynasty Warriors, this game is leagues above the average Warriors spin-off title. Much like Hyrule Warriors, Tecmo Koei seems to have favored Nintendo when making Warriors games of their properties, to the point where this is one of the most polished and fun entries in the Warriors franchise, next to Dynasty Warriors 5 Empires, of course. Not to mention, the crossover of several different Fire Emblem stories, as well as new characters that are really likable. Seriously, Liana's my Fire Emblem waifu. If you want the full package when it comes to a hack-and-slash game, look no further than Fire Emblem Warriors. Also, can we get Liana for Smash? Please? It's not gonna happen, is it? Number 16. Ukulele and the Impossible Lair. This is another repeat, this time from my top games of 2019 list. If you saw that list earlier this year, then you know my feelings on it, so I'll make this brief. It's a side-scrolling platformer akin to games like Donkey Kong Country, Earthworm Jim, and Yoshi's Island. It also includes overworld segments that include puzzles and unlockables for progressing in the game. While I'm not as fond of this, it does add more depth to the standard platforming formula, and is actually really fun. If the first game in the series just didn't grip you, trust me when I say this one definitely will. Number 15. Doom 2016. I've never been a big fan of FPSs or even Doom in general, but I struggle to think of a better example for the type of FPS I enjoy than the original Doom, or one of its many iterations. So when Doom 2016 hit the scene, I was very interested, and damn did they get this right. Taking all the things that made the original Doom so fun and turbocharging it to the modern gaming spectrum. Where Doom 3 failed as a successor to the series with its more story-driven and horror-inspired Half-Life-esque narrative and gameplay, Doom 2016 goes right for the jugular with balls-to-the-wall gunfighting action that reminds me of my favorite twitchy shooters from the late 90s and early 2000s. Only misstep being that the puzzle-solving, level layouts, and backtracking certainly make it feel like a 90s FPS, almost to a fault, but it makes up for it with being just a fun game to play that it's forgiven for its setbacks. I have yet to finish Doom 2016, and I want to because I recently picked up Doom Eternal for PC, and I've been watching folks like OneRoll and Decooters ripping and tearing it up on Twitch. If you've been missing an era of FPSs inspired by the original Doom 2016 is a delightfully bloody masterpiece among a sea of bland and brown-gray shooters. Number 14. Yoshi's Woolly World. The Yoshi series is an interesting one. Yoshi's Island is a fantastic, if not difficult, side-scrolling platformer for the SNES. I never finished Yoshi's story, but I want to someday. And I don't think I need to talk about these. So I think it's safe to say that no one really knows what the series is going to do next. Yoshi's Woolly World is a surprising turn to form that also innovates on the Yoshi series. It starts off all cute and newbie friendly, but then it just becomes, I just want to stop dying! This was the first time since the original Yoshi's Island that I just sat down and immersed myself in a new game in the series, and it was worth playing through, even if the last few worlds really busted my balls. I recently picked up the next game in the series, Yoshi's Crafted World, when it went on sale. I haven't had a chance to play it yet, and I've heard it's not quite as good as Woolly World, but I'm sure I'll get to it eventually. If you've been disappointed with the sequels to the original Yoshi's Island and have been craving something more akin to the first game, don't let the cutesy exterior fool you. Yoshi's Woolly World is the full package. Number 13. River City Girls. Yeah, this once again is another repeat. Like I said in my top 10 games of 2019 video, River City Girls is one of the best beat-em-ups in recent years. It keeps the Kunio series staples such as an open world, RPG elements, and fun combat. It's even more fun with a friend and doesn't skimp out on the details. If you've been craving the next best beat-em-up, this is one you can't pass up. And Kyoko is still best girl. Oh my god, I love her, she's adorable. Number 12. Earth Defense Force 4.1, The Shadow of New Despair. This one might come as a surprise, as I just talked about Iron Rain being my favorite of the series in my top 10 games of 2019 video, but this is a game you certainly can't pass up. Not the most polished of the series, but still, EDF 4.1 is a ton of fun and a clusterfuck of lasers, giant insects, and robots. If you want some dumb fun, this game delivers and then some. Like most games in the EDF series, it is prone to slowdown, glitches, and bad hitboxes from time to time, but you'll be having so much fun blasting through hordes of aliens that you'll probably excuse it. Iron Rain is the better game, but if you just want to hop into the action without getting too mixed up in the technical, Earth Defense Force 4.1 is a great place to start. Number 11. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. It's the best game in the Smash series. Just play it. That's it. I got nothing else. It's just good. It's just fucking good! Liana for Smash. Number 10. Sengoku Basara 3, Samurai Heroes. I've talked many times for my love of the strategy hack-and-slash action games in the Warrior series, but in my mind, no series does it better than Sengoku Basara. While the series had a rocky start with the first entry that is insanely difficult and without co-op, and a decent second entry that just missed the mark, Sengoku Basara 3 Samurai Heroes is the game that solidifies the franchise for me. It takes all the things I love about the Dynasty Warrior series and expands on it, making for a fun game with lots to do. Later games in the series like Sengoku Basara 4 Sumeragi added a lot more content and modes, but the gameplay has never been as tight as it has in Samurai Heroes. If there's one hack-and-slash game to play, make it Samurai Heroes. Number 9. Undertale. I love RPGs, but outside the Pokemon series, I rarely finish them. 40+ hour quests just don't do it for me. They're almost too much for me, and yet I love them, even if I rarely finish them. Then I played Undertale, and I gotta say, this might be one of my favorites in the genre. It takes all the good and interesting things I love about RPGs and presents them in a new and innovative way that makes it stand out above the rest. A lot of trappings and issues I take with most RPGs, it masterfully shakes up in a way that's hard to explain in one paragraph. I know this game has been praised to death, and its fan base is just as, if not as cringy as Bendy's, but I can't help it. This game is just so good that I can overlook those things. I've only completed a neutral playthrough, and I'm aware there's so much more to discover in the other routes, but I cannot stress how important of a game Undertale is. If you haven't played it, please ignore the cringe and give it a try, because you'll be missing out on one of the best RPGs of all time. Number 8. Donkey Kong Country Returns. I love DKC. I grew up with the original trilogy as my first platformers, and I waited for the series to return to this format. So when Donkey Kong Country Returns came out, I initially wasn't a fan. Things just seemed too different from the games I grew up with. Once I gave it another go, I was able to see the game for what it is, and that it's a new fun take on an old formula. DKC Returns doesn't try to bait you with nostalgia and familiarity, it gives you something new and fresh that feels so right. It's not perfect as the jump boost from enemies only sometimes works, hit detection is not perfect, using the Wiimote motion controls for certain actions like rolling and ground pounding is a little gimmicky, and the rocket barrel stages can go to hell, but I'd be doing a great disservice by not including this game on the list. I own Tropical Freeze on the Wii U, and I have heard it's the better game, but I haven't gotten very far in it, so I can't comment much on it. But if you like side-scrolling platformers and want to see the next evolution in the DKC formula, you can't miss out on Donkey Kong Country Returns. Number 7. Fortune Street. Do you like Mario Party? Do you like Monopoly? Well, stick them together and you get Fortune Street. Hey, bada boom, bada bing! Out of all the party games I own, Fortune Street is the one I've spent the most time with. It's a great blend of some of the best board games in a Mario and Dragon Quest package. While not as streamlined as Mario Party, it does offer a type of gameplay that's more satisfying and fun in my opinion. Buying up property, stocks, making deals with other players adds to a fun and exciting game that can last hours on end. The only things I wish were different is that the minigames were more frequent like in Mario Party, but that's a very minor thing. If you don't already hate your friends because of Mario Party, Fortune Street might be the way to do it, and you're going to have a blast the whole way through. Also, the sequel on PS4, Itadaki Street, is just as fun, but you'll need a guide to play it as it's all in Japanese, or in my case, Chinese. It's still good though! Number 6. Resident Evil 7. When I last covered this game, I'd only played the beginning hour, and even then I loved this game. Since then, I have played through most of the campaign, as well as experienced it in VR, and I gotta say, I love this game even more. If you want the ultimate survival horror experience, play Resident Evil 7. It is my favorite survival horror game that has a perfect mix of horror and excitement. It's even scarier in VR. Number 5. Overwatch. When it comes to the FPS genre, there's very few I enjoy. The Call of Duties and Battlefields are too generic and boring for me, and I've never been one for gunfighting in general. Color me surprised that I was actually into Overwatch. I've been playing this game on and off since beta, and it's easily my most played game in the genre. I guess I just like twitchy hero shooters with superpowers. This was also the first game I caved and bought into microtransactions, and it was for cosmetics of all things. Sure, you can play the game earning loot boxes without ever spending a dime, and for the most part that's how I played, but every so often I buy a loot box just to get fucked. The only downsides are that comp is bullshit, there's no crossplay, and there's no story mode outside of an annual event, which is odd because there's so much lore in this game, yet no story mode? Luckily, the sequel is rectifying that, as well as Blizzard adding new gameplay content available to those who stick with the first game, meaning you'll still be able to experience the new content it has to offer before upgrading. I haven't played this much recently, but I don't doubt I will once we get closer to Overwatch 2. If you've heard the good and the bad about this game, just forget it and give it a play. Also, D.Va is a queen, and I don't care that Blizzard tried to scrub it from canon. She's a professional StarCraft player, and that's rad as fuck. Number 4. Cuphead. Cuphead was my top game of 2017, and there's not much more I can say about it than I already did. It's fantastic, it's hard, and holy crap, it's on the Switch now! I guess the only takeaway is, as time has gone by, I wish it had more levels rather than boss fights, but that doesn't mean I love this game any less. It's still a masterpiece of run-and-gun goodness, and I can't wait for a physical version to come out. Come on, Studio MDHR, Microsoft, Nintendo, make it happen. Number 3. Mega Man 10 and Mega Man 11. So this may be a cop-out, but I seriously had a hard time picking between these two. Both are expertly crafted games in the Mega Man franchise for different reasons. 10 is a fantastic throwback to Mega Man's glory years on the NES, with all the added features I would have wanted and less of the bullshit caused by limitations. And 11 is the next evolution of the series as it jumps into HD. This is surprising because both came out at opposite times of the last decade, with Mega Man 10 coming shortly after Mega Man 9 in 2010, and Mega Man 11 coming out near the end of the decade in 2018. Both are worth your time. I did videos on both games. They both sell at a reduced retail price, and if that's not enough to convince you, it's fucking Mega Man!
Fucking love Mega Man! Yeah!
Number 2. Pokemon Sword and Shield. The hardest decision of this whole video was deciding which Pokemon game would make the list. This decade gave us 4 generations, 3 remakes, and a ton of spin-offs, leaving me with a lot of options. But for me, it really boiled down to 2 mainline entries, Pokemon Black and White, and Pokemon Sword and Shield. I actually went ahead and replayed Pokemon Black for the first time in a few years, just to get it more fresh in my mind, and at the end of the day, while I love the 5th gen games, Pokemon Sword and Shield have been just a big step forward for the franchise that it feels like the better game. That's not to say I dislike any of the games from the last few generations, 7th gen being the only meh of the bunch. 8th gen just did it for me the same way 5th gen originally did, and then some. After 4th gen, I was going to give up on Pokemon, but then 5th gen fixed major problems I had with the previous. 7th gen didn't burn me as bad as 4th gen did, but it certainly was the low point for Pokemon during the last 10 years. I even considered putting Pokemon Go on here, and while it is to this day the Pokemon game I put the most hours in, it doesn't give me the same feeling as the core games do. I've rambled on forever about Sword and Shield, so there isn't much more I can say. Even before the expansions come out, I constantly have been going back to play Sword to do battles, events, and raids. I hope that only keeps up when the first expansion drops in June. If you have a Switch and you're still butthurt about the Dexit, get over yourself and pick these games up. You're only cheating yourself by missing out on the best entries in the franchise. And if you still don't like it, fine. At least you tried it. Number 1. Monster Hunter World. Is anyone surprised by this? My top game of 2018 is, of course, also my top game of the last decade, Monster Hunter World. I've already gushed about how this game is a massive overhaul and improvement over every previous entry, and with Iceborne it finally adds G rank, now known as Master rank, as well as a ton of new monsters, new areas to explore, and new events with more content coming out as the game updates. As of this recording, I have completed the main storyline of Iceborne, and I'm working on the post-game content. I also now have a much beefier PC, so eventually I'll be starting this game from scratch all over again to play it on there as well. If you still haven't been convinced that this is the game to play, Monster Hunter went from a weird niche series to one of Capcom's most profitable franchises. I don't care what platform you choose, you gotta try Monster Hunter World. It's not only the best game in the franchise, but in my opinion, it's the best game of the last 10 years. Wow, this video ended up taking me much longer than I expected, and it was no easy feat. With a plethora of games available in the last 10 years, I'm sure my list differentiates from almost anyone's. I'm curious to see what your favorite games from the decade are. Please leave a comment going over a few of your favorites. Seriously, I want to know. I didn't play every game from the last decade, and I'm always looking for new games to play, so I encourage you to let me know about what I missed. In any case, I hope this video opens some of you up to more games to try out, and who knows, maybe one of these will be your next gaming obsession. In any case, thanks for watching this video, stay safe, and I'll see you at the start of 2021 to talk about my top games of 2020.